Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to talk about the best practices in developing a mobile strategy and a little bit about mobile device management. My name is Patrick McGugan, and I am Director of Business Management Services here at ARG. For the last 4 years or so, we've built a mobility practice. About 10 years prior to that, I ran a telecom expense management company and started in the business of telecom in 1992. So if you can imagine, I had hair when we started, and I don't now, and that's really a commentary on how long we've been doing this kind of work. So we have our first poll question. How many of you have a mobile program in place today? And we'll give you all a few minutes to take a look and answer the questions. If you're on a mobile device, if you're watching this on your tablet or your iPad, you will likely have to push a button on the left-hand side that says vote. And that will enter your answer. Well, about 50, a little more weighted to the no side. Only about 57% of the folks out there don't have a mobile policy in place today, formalized anyway, and about 42 do. So that is great. Glad to know that we're talking about things that may be helpful to you in the way that you run your business. So first and foremost, let's start with the why. Why build a mobile strategy at all? And first, our response is it's not an option anymore, it's an expectation. Your employees expect to be able to work from anywhere at any time on any device and have access to all the information. We are no longer tethered to our desks. We're not, office workers only anymore, and it's not, 9 to 5. It's many cases turning into a 24/7 job and the expectation to have access to information 24/7. The order of magnitude in the devices that we're expected to support and provide is growing exponentially, and we'll look at that in more detail in the next slide. And then mobile computing will become the anchor of the way that most organizations run and provide data, provide access, certainly in the next decade. So it's happening. It's not going away. It's only increasing. There's no putting that genie back in the bottle. So to talk about the order of magnitude and the growth in computing. So in the 60s, between the 60s and the 80s, it's about 1 million mainframes deployed in the market. The next 10 years brought about 10 million mini computers. 10 years after that, there was about 100 million PC computers. And then the internet computing brought us to about 1 billion. And with the mobile computing, we're expecting in the next decade to top out somewhere around 10 billion. So you can see that we've come a long way in 60 years. And again, there's no going backwards. Innovation is continuing to move forward. So what are the drivers? How do we get here? Why are we going down this road? First of all, supporting mobile users, devices, and applications. Essentially, all of us are looking to increase efficiency, increase productivity. We're also looking to have faster access to information to our coworkers, to our customers, to our constituents. It's almost real time now. There's the thought of sending a letter by snail mail and waiting for the response to know if you're going to do business together is archaic. But you know what? That's the way my dad did business. So we changed a lot in just a short period of time, as far as that goes. And then lastly, the cost savings. So our experience is that tablets are becoming an acceptable business tool today. Taking those out to a meeting is a lot less expensive than taking a full-on laptop. So we're starting to see folks adopt different tools, which essentially provide different cost-saving elements along the way as well. So let's set some ground rules in terms of what we're going to talk about. BYOD. First and foremost, BYOD is one of our wonderful acronyms. We in telecom need to be as important as doctors in the world, so we have a lot of acronyms. So BYOD is bring your own device. And we'll try to comment on our acronyms as we go forward. And if we don't, feel free to ask about them in the Q&A box. Again, we'll touch on that at the end. So BYOD policy really describes how the IT organization within the company is going to support end user devices that are not company owned. It's a little bit different than consumerization policy because the consumerization policy will also give some guidelines as to what the company expects, behavior, what you have access to. It's a more broad in scope of how you interact with personal devices in the corporate setting. End user policy speaks specifically to what you expect of your end users, as opposed to corporate mobility policy, which speaks to predominantly the protection of company assets. What's the company going to do? What does the company expect from data protection, security, those types of things. And then lastly, the acceptable use policy is pretty straightforward, dealing specifically with what are your users allowed to do and what are they not. Can they go to certain websites? Are you blocking specific applications? Can your users text and drive, or is it specifically forbidden in your policy? We've seen many cases over the last 10 years or so of folks that had some kind of problem while they were using their corporate device or their device for corporate purposes and were involved in, say, an accident while texting and driving. Well, guess what? The company has some exposure in that. So you want to make sure that at the very least you're promising, or your employees are promising they won't do that, they will follow the rules. It's not something your organization supports. So that's really the definition. That's what we're talking about in terms of the different aspects within policy and some of the wording that's used in developing those policies. And I've said policy a lot because it is a primary concern today. It's really the only protection that you have as an organization against your users and what they may do to increase the exposure of the organization. So we have a second poll question here, and we'd like to know, what is your current mobile policy? Do you have corporate liable, meaning the company owns and provides devices and service to your end users? Are you in a BYOD environment where you allow your users to bring their personal devices in for work purposes? Are you in a mixture? A hybrid, because again, we are a world of acronyms, is called COPE. It's corporate owned, personally enabled. That's one version of it, where you allow your users to have company devices and treat them as if they were their own. So they can have their, mobile running app to keep track of how many, miles they're putting in a day or what they're eating or what have you. But it's still a corporate liable device, so you own, control, and operate it. So according to our poll, we're pretty equally split. 43% are corporate liable, 31 are BYOD, and about 25 have a hybrid. So that's great. So it's nice to know that we are seeing in our group online with us the same thing that we see in the marketplace with the companies that we work with. So next, talk about best practices for building a BYOD strategy. Again, that's bring your own device. The first and foremost, we believe that you should be building the business case for allowing mobility into your workplace on the benefits to the business. It's not going to be a financial return. Essentially, you're going to be paying money out that you're not paying today. So build your case for it based on the value that that's going to provide for you in terms of increased customer awareness, access, real-time efficiency, productivity, those kinds of things. Because the financial windfall is going to be down the road. It's not going to be immediate. Secondly, you want to organize your IT organization for success. You want to make sure that you have the right people in place, because guess what? Anything that anybody owns that they want to use, to touch your network and to do business with, they're going to expect your IT shop to be able to support it and know all the answers. So it's best to organize yourselves in a way that makes the most sense. So set up your ticket system, set up some mechanism, create a subject matter expert within the team. Do something to kind of stem the tide of your users coming to you for anything and everything that they think should be possible with their cell phones or their tablets. Leverage partners and strategies that make the most sense. Work with people that will support your mission in the way that makes the most sense for you. So it can be prem-based, it can be cloud-based, it can be third-party software, it could be help desk solutions, it could be expense management tools. All of those things are viable options for putting in place to have a more proficient program, which in theory will lead to better productivity, more revenue, and meeting the goals and the objectives of setting this up in the first place. And lastly, second to last, deploy a mobile device management strategy. It's really the only thing that gives you any sort of protection. against your users and whatever the heck they may do with their devices out there in the world. Because again, don't forget, you don't own it. So whatever they're doing is up to them. And you need to have something in place to protect your organization, the data, the people, the information, the network itself against malware, against any type of virus, any kind of threat is going to be available because people are using whatever they have today. And then lastly, define a policy and trust models that protect your business in the compliance. So if you're HIPAA, if you have government regulations, if you have any kind of security clearances that need to be maintained, you want to make sure that whatever you're allowing your users to do fulfill those requirements, because ultimately that's going to be the bellwether of whether or not what you're doing makes sense and if it's okay to move forward with. So items to consider within a bring your own device strategy. First and foremost, the company doesn't own the phone number, which is an asset. So if you're a sales organization or you have folks that are contacting you via that individual cell phone number and that individual isn't part of your organization tomorrow, what happens to all that contact? What happens to all the information that's on that device? So really there's no way to protect yourself from losing potential revenue down the line or potential whatever the value is that your organization brings because you don't know who's contacting that person who's no longer with you. So in essence, no control. Data is discoverable, and that discovery can be expensive. So God forbid your organization is in some sort of suit. Everybody that has access to information on your network within your organization can have those devices requisitioned for discovery, and those hours aren't free. So the broader the net that you cast for your network accessibility, the more exposure you have and the more risk you have. And by the way, that's not limited to just the company information, just the business data. That's everything. That's your Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever the next thing is after that. I have teenagers, so I'll probably find out what that is when I get home. But anyway, all of that is susceptible to being discovered in the courts. So make sure that anything you're allowing to touch your network is something you want to touch your network. And I don't really know how to do that from the individual liable policy or BYOD world. What happens when an employee shares a device? If you're anything like me, my kids were young, they squeaked in a restaurant, the first thing I did is give them something electronic to keep them quiet so I could enjoy my meal. Guess what? That may be the same tablet or iPhone that's hitting your network when the employee comes into work tomorrow. Who sent, so the question is, what do they have access to on that device? What protections are there? What's going on? BYOD devices are subject to border search and seizure. So if your employee is traveling internationally and they have something that may be offensive to the host country on their personal device, you may be opening yourself up to some problems that you might not have had to have if that was better planned for or better managed or differently managed. And then what happens when an employee gets rid of the device? So if that device is lost or stolen in the individual liable or BYOD world, all I have to do is go out and buy a new phone. I don't have to tell anybody in IT. I don't have to secure my data. I don't have to wipe anything. All of that information is still living on my phone wherever it is. Even if I've recycled it or turned it into the guy at Best Buy or the AT&T store, and now some 17-year-old kid has access to everything that lived on my phone from our company's perspective. So potential open for exposure there, and those are the things that you really want to take into consideration when you're building your policy. What are you going to do about that? That's really what it comes down to is what are you going to do about these things? How are you going to protect yourself as best you can? Some security risks. So Thought Leader Group cited BYODs being lost or stolen as the #1 concern in their realm. So again, it's loss of data. It's not knowing what's out there and who has it and what happened to it. Another group did some research and found that only about 1 in 4 of those devices could be remotely wiped. So you can only turn them into a brick or factory reset, if you will, about 25% of the time. And that's a lot of information that's floating around without any control. The other problem with that scenario is that most organizations don't really know what they've lost. They don't understand, they can't assess the threat that they're under when that information has disappeared. Lastly, when devices bypass your built-in mechanisms for security, either incoming or outgoing, you're again exposed. So if you've noticed, the theme of this conversation so far has been exposure, and the actions of your users may or may not be putting your organization at risk, whether it be through data, whether it be through the way they're using their devices, who has them, who they're sharing them with. Again, there's just very little control in that world. And we'll talk about it a little bit more, but bring your own device policy really begs for mobile device management. The two should only be thought of as going hand in hand. That's the only way you can really control any modicum of control of what's on and what's happening to those devices. But again, we'll talk about that more in a little bit. So bring your own device is a very viable option. It was very hot a few years ago, and quite frankly, our experience has been people are coming back from that world and moving into more of a hybrid model or more of a corporate liable policy. Mobile security concerns. What are people thinking about? What are they trying to do? What do they plan to do in the next 12 months? Most folks, about half of the folks that were involved in this survey, try to tighten up policy, create more awareness, change user behavior in some way. Others are focusing on the operating system of the devices that are deployed within their community. Very simply said, the older the operating system, the more risk you have with that. There's more holes in it. There's less patches that are applied to the security leaks in those operating systems. If you all are familiar with the iCloud stories, that was very popular in the news a couple of weeks ago, as well as the Android threats in terms of malware and in the looseness of the marketplace where folks are buying and downloading apps from. The more upgraded or the newer the operating system, the less exposure you have from some of those problems. Some people are just decreasing the allowance of mobile devices touching the network. But again, that's a really hard thing to say to somebody, oh, by the way, you can't be as productive as you were yesterday because we're not going to let you use your devices to hit our network anymore. The one that scares me beyond pale is the 20% that plan to do nothing. Please, I implore you, don't be one of those 20%. Whether you're working with ARG or internally or with a legal firm to tighten up your policies or create one, please do something. If you're not doing anything today, it's a problem. You know, we're behind. We need to help you catch up. So if you're one of those 20%, I urge you, please rethink your position and do something. Something is better than nothing, believe me. So next we'll move into the corporate liable environment, and that's really focused more on the company providing devices, access to the information in a much more controlled environment. In the corporate liable world, first you want to be specific, but you also want to be adept. So you want to outline exactly what the users can do, who they are, what they get, and be as fairly, as fair and as standard in that as you can, because there's nothing like office politics to destroy an organization. We work with one company who every time a new device is released by Apple, they have a group of about 12 or so executives that get that new thing, and then their old thing, which is generally about a year old, because Apple's got a pretty good cycle of helping us buy things and know when that's time. That goes down to their admins, and then it just kind of rolls down that way. But it's a very political decision. It's a very recognized thing of who has what device. So you want to be very specific. You want to mitigate that as much as possible within your policy and the way you deploy your program within your organization. You want your policy to be delivered from top down. If it's an IT-led policy mandate, that's a lot of resistance is what we've seen. But when it comes from top down, people kind of look at it like, oh, the man's putting more rules on us, I guess we got to do it. And they kind of just fall in line a little bit better when it's top down, not so much peer-to-peer. When you're in a corporate liable world, you own the device. So you have ultimate control. You can add, take away, you can upgrade. It's really yours. You can allow for or disallow for whatever you want. And then you can enforce it, because guess what? You get to take it away because you own it. It's not taking away somebody's family phone at that point. You're taking away company assets, and you can treat it as such. And you can expect your employees to be treated as such. I think one of the most important things that I learned in the corporate environment, there's no expectation of privacy, period. It's just not. So you know what? You have kids' pictures, graduation, photos, wedding, honeymoon, whatever, and we need to wipe it. Sorry, it's a company asset. So it makes it a little bit tougher pill to swallow, but at the same time, you're not erasing somebody's personal information off their personal device, which causes a lot of problems down the line. And then we want you to think about, too, automation. Use as much automation as possible. And then also use a WEM, wireless expense management, or a program that incorporates not only expense management, but vendor support. If you're not sure about who might be able to help you with that, look real closely into your camera and think about that guy, because he can probably help. So with that being said, if it's not us, please think about using somebody, because it's an organization's primary focus. It's an add-on thing into your world. And you know what, sometimes the experts have different tips and tricks. We're aggregating knowledge and applying that to all of our customers. I'm working with many of you online today in that regard, and I'm sure that at least from our perspective, we have a great relationship and we've been able to provide a lot of value. So I encourage you to work with somebody, if not us, but it should be us, find somebody to help you in that regard. End of the commercial. So also, items to consider in the corporate liable world. The organization does own the phone number. So again, it is a company asset. The expectation of privacy is whatever you allow it to be. But at the end of the day, if you need to, you own it. You can do what you need to with it, including kill it, wipe it, destroy it, take it away, remove the privilege, what have you. Pricing, why leave money on the table? So most organizations in the bring your own device world will provide a stipend, some dollar figure, and we've seen anywhere from about $75 to $150 as the reimbursement for that privilege. And not sure that really is in line with where the market is today. So in many cases, BYOD policies were implemented to save money, but in fact, they're actually costing more money to the organization. When you're doing things in a corporate environment, you get to leverage that volume. You get to leverage the overall picture for optimization, not only from cost, but from services and multiple providers. Not everybody does everything as well, and there may be a great mix there that you can bring in and with help of third parties be able to manage seamlessly. You can avoid unnecessary expenses with reimbursements and those types of things. You're able to leverage cost allocation, so any wireless expense management program that you're working with, you can allocate cost to business units, to projects. It helps you understand where your overhead's going a little bit better. What we've seen many times is that guy who works in a very small department is the biggest consumer of the data or of the resource, and therefore is hit with a disproportionate amount or is responsible for a disproportionate amount of the cost. And when you realize that, it helps you understand, gosh, how come my receptionist is my highest consumer, and does that make sense? Does that fit the job model? And then you don't lose control of the data or the devices. It's much more within your grasp. You own it. You operate it. It's yours to work with as you need to. And then lastly, you can match more appropriately the devices, the programs, the plans, what you're paying out to the job and the role of the employee. Not everybody has to have the same thing. It just doesn't make sense all the time. So you can set up different groups and organize them in a way that makes the most sense for what they need to do on a daily basis and what their job functions are and what the appropriate amount of expenses that should be allotted to that. There are some risks in a corporate liable policy as well. It's not a panacea. It doesn't make everything go away. First of all, there's data leakage. So unlike, well, not unlike, in the BYOD world, there's opportunity for data to escape your network. So there's offline storage, iCloud, Dropbox. You don't know necessarily what's living out there, but in the corporate liable world, you can have an expectation that it is there and used appropriately, or it's not there at all based on your policy. And then with mobile device management, you can understand what is actually living on that device. So you can really tightly manage that info. Device upgrade, policy, and replacement. This is near and dear to my heart as we've just had an iPhone new release of their latest widget. And it's amazing to me how no matter whenever that happens, catastrophes with your existing cell phone go up by about, 7,000% or so. So from our perspective, you want to make sure that that is clearly defined in your policy. If you break your phone, if you lose your phone, if it takes a swim in some place you don't want to reach in to get it back from, so what? What happens with that? Are you expected to replace it yourself? Is the expectation the company will replace it? If you're in contract, if you're past your contract end date, maybe there's differences there. So those are the things that you want to be careful of, because no matter what, when there's a new thing on the market, you're going to get asked for it a lot, believe me. OS version control and updates. So again, the risk of the operating system being out of date increases your risk of malware and other problems hitting your network. So you want to make sure that you are working with your end users to bring them along to the latest version, because there's patches and fixes and things like that that are applied within each one of those new releases. Lost and stolen equipment. So when equipment goes missing, the nice part about being in the corporate liable world is that your employee needs to come back to you to get it replaced. In the individual liable or BYOD world, they don't. So they can just go out and get a new phone, and you don't know your stuff is out in the world somewhere or in what state it might be in. So it's a risk, but also it's a little bit better than being in the BYOD environment. Jailbreaking or rooting devices, meaning stripping the operating system of its parameters, opening it up for other types of problems. You void your warranties. There's just a lot of issues with that. And again, that's something that MDMs will be able to identify for you, so you can deal with that in real time if it should come up. And then password protection. That seems to be a bigger problem than I would think. The 4-digit code that you need to put in to access the device for many users is just more than it can handle. And I didn't realize it, but I fell into that category not too long ago when I was on vacation, needed to take pictures real quick. And it was a real pain in the butt to put the 4-digit code in, so I took it off and realized, you know what, I just created a problem for myself that I tell other people every day, don't take it off. So don't take it off. It creates a problem. It's the only measure you have. If nothing else, it's the only thing that you can do to secure that device before it hits whoever picks it up from the lavatory, from the back of the cab, from the table restaurant, restaurant table, or what have you. So what does your company do? So there's about 1,700 decision makers were polled, and it's what we expect. It's about 50-50 on the high end of people that allow folks to hit their network with their own devices in some way, shape, or form, whether they're reimbursed or not, and folks that are providing cell service to their users. So from that standpoint, it's pretty much what you'd expect. Those are really the two options. There are some other statistics there, but really what we're focusing on is where are folks deploying their resources today? Is it in BYOD space? Is it in the corporate liable space? And what are you doing about that once you're in there? We're going to have another poll question pop up here for you. We'd like to know, are you currently deploying a mobile device management system today? Do you have something in place? We'll give you guys a minute or two to answer that for us. Well, we're definitely talking to the right folks, because right now we're heavily slanted towards no. As you can see, we're about 90-10 on the no side. Which is fairly understandable. Mobile device management is something that was fairly immature and has become more mature over the last couple of years. We're starting to see the next wave of it, quite frankly. So let's talk a little bit about what that means, what it is. Let's talk about with some definitions to level set. So mobile device management is a software that is designed to provide information about the devices themselves. So what state are they in, who owns it, what operating system is on it. It's a way that the admins or the headquarters can know what's happening at the remote. So if you think of it in that way, each one of those devices is a little bit like a node, and that node reports back to headquarters of its status, of the information that lives on that device. So it's a great way to be able to control and manage and understand where your users are, what they're doing, what's living there, and what can you do about it. It's often combined, and this is kind of the next stage, with additional functionality, which makes it more of an enterprise-level application. You can literally deliver applications. You can deal with version control. You can segregate data on that device, meaning separate your personal from your corporate we call it sandboxing within the device and the operating system there. And then lastly, it can be deployed either as a prem-based solution for those of you that love to own and hug your hardware, or you can put it in the cloud. You can even do it as a service. Quite frankly, you can be as involved as you want to be, or you can simply work with somebody to set up your policy and create your user groups, and then let them run it for you and just provide updates to that as you need to. So it's an evolving tool. It's certainly come a long way, and it does some really cool things along the way as well. So the functionality involved with mobile device management, again, we're an acronym focus, so we're in MDM world now. Inventory, it's going to provide for you. Actually, you're going to load the phone numbers of the devices that you have that you accept to touch your network. And then they're going to have an application delivered to them over the air. And it's going to self-discover. It's going to report back to the admin module everything that's living on that device, what operating system it's running, whether it's in compliance, if it has a security passcode set to it. So all the things that you want to know about your device are going to be reported back to you in real time. So it's very, very instrumental in being able to understand what's happening in your mobile world and what you can do about it. I'm not going to read all the bullets to you, but essentially it gives you the ability to interact with those devices from a central place. You don't need them in your hand to be able to control and operate and make sure your users are doing what they need to do or what you expect them to do based on the policy and the agreements that you have in place. The big thing that's happening now is content management, application management. So if you're in a world where your users, let's say, have a tablet and you're in an inventory environment, let's say you're a moving company, and your crew leaders are going into a place that they're going to pack up and ship. Traditionally, that's done on a form, right? Your guy is out there, he's got a tablet, he's writing it down, he's doing the best he can to quote the number of boxes, the size truck that he's going to need, how long it's going to take, the number of labor hours, what types of device, what types of stuff is in that apartment or that office building. So in that world, it happens, it gets brought back to the office, somebody keys it into some database that then spits out a quote, perhaps an insurance agreement or what have you. All that takes time and resources. And guess what? Maybe you understood the way that guy wrote. Maybe he writes like me. You don't understand anything that's on that page. Delay, delay, delay. And we all know time to revenue is the most important thing that we can do as a business. So if you can tablify that or webify that and give folks access to it in real time on a tablet and have it come back. So those are the applications that I'm sure you have your own versions of all of that, but you can control that from an MDM platform. So when that entry, that version 1.0 thing lives on a tablet, and you need it to go to 2.0, you can have every driver across the country bring it back to headquarters or ship it home, to home base or what have you. In an MDM environment, you can push that right from the central app. So those are the kinds of things that go beyond just what version of the operating system do you have, or do you have a password. It's really become a business tool much more so than just a security management tool. So it's evolving, and it's continuing to evolve like everything in our world at a very rapid pace. And again, it's not going backwards, it's only going forward. So we have another question for you. For those of you that are using a mobile device management platform today, we'd love to learn a little bit about which one you're using. This is a very difficult question, or top secret, I'm not sure which. Well, we had almost 9% say they were using MDM, but not willing to share which one. So that means you're either so happy you don't want anybody else to know and get competitive, or you don't want to talk about it. All right, well, we'll just move forward then. So our friends at Gartner, who love to put dots on boxes, have defined the market this way, and quite frankly, we're seeing this as well. The uptake in the industry, the innovation in the industry is coming from that upper right-hand side. These are the folks that are working with carriers, that are deploying their solutions more frequently in a universal environment. Some of those on the bottom left are more niche focused. They're providing MDM in a very specific case or a very limited way. The good news is that these services are ubiquitous. You don't have to be all on one platform. You don't have to be all business liable or corporate liable. It's designed to take whatever you have, no matter what it is, and help you manage it to the best of your ability. The other good part of this story is ARG works with all these folks. So we have access to all these vendors, very much like our network services. We can work with many people. We're vendor neutral. We're unbiased. We're just going to find you or help you find based on the requirements that you may or may not know, so we can help with that as well. What's the best fit? Because like anything, there's Fords and Chevys and BMWs and Yugos and who knows what. So we want to make sure that you're in the right solution to solve the challenges that you're trying to solve. And quite frankly, there's a range of them, and they all do things differently, and some of them do different things. So we're going to take a look at some of the admin modules from these applications, just to give you a feel of what that might look like. So you're going to notice that in the MDM platform, they're all going to give you some level of metrics. Generally, they're all going to talk about your operating systems, what's in compliance with your security policy, what the differentiators are between the devices in some way, what's following your security protocols, what has the application installed and working on the device. You're also going to notice that they all will have different tabs to focus on those different elements. It's very much the same information at a high level, but the different MDM platforms allow you to do different things. Some of them on the more function-rich side of things can allow you to do things like enable or disable cameras. You can geofence. You can do time of day activities. So there's lots of different things that you can do with these tools. So you want to make sure that you're getting into the tool that really helps you accomplish your goal. A lot of the folks that we talk to don't have that sophisticated of a requirement. So you know what? You don't always need something that has all the bells and whistles if you don't need all the bells and whistles. Because like anything else, the more it can do, the more function feature-rich it is, sometimes the more expensive it is. And just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, these things are going to run from anywhere around $1 per line per month, on the very high end of maybe $5 per line per month. And that, on the high end of that, that's managing it as a service. You don't have to do anything. You set it up, you turn it on, and then you have somebody else run it for you, including updates, including trouble tickets, that kind of stuff. So it can be very low cost and higher effort, or it can be a little bit higher cost with no effort. And like anything else, that's a business decision for your organization. So in conclusion, there's one or two takeaways I'd really like you to have today. First and foremost, it's a reality in the workplace. Mobility is exponential growth. And guess what? It's becoming an exponential support requirement as well. So you probably know that as well as I do. I only manage about 100 lines here at ARG, and it's a daily event to work with somebody with their device. And that could be something that is truly business focused, or it could be, hey, how do I get my font bigger? So it's coming to us at work, and we need to be able to manage that. You have exposure. You need to be able to manage that exposure through policy, through tools, through expectations and clear communications with your constituents, with your employees. The velocity of change is only increasing in the marketplace. It's getting bigger, faster, stronger. The carriers aren't really doing a lot to help you manage that information. So a lot is left up to you. It's a very, very strong DIY component in mobility. Not many folks have a CIO that is mobile focused, or I should say a PBX vendor. There's not like a PBX vendor for the mobile stuff. That's kind of what we hope to help you accomplish with some strategy and some best practices in quite frankly, this conversation. So if you're not already working with ARG in your mobile practice as you have been with your network services, we do that. We're pretty good at it. We've been doing it a long time. We've helped thousands of customers with hundreds of thousands of lines over the years. So we'd love to talk about it. We're open for conversations, and we'd love to to engage with you on any of these topics and anything you think might be of interest to you. And generally, it's a pretty flexible conversation. We can go a long way with that. So thank you again for taking the time to join and participate. All except for that last question. I'm not sure what that's all about. But we're going to open up for Q&A, and I see that we do have one question already. Take a look here. So do you have a business case to move wireless back into the company? What about support costs and resources? Yes, absolutely we can. So really what we need to engage in that conversation is what are you doing today? And then what our role would be is to go kind of survey the market, tell you what providing that same level of service would look like from a hardware, from a monthly recurring cost standpoint, build in some support mechanisms for you, and just give you a comparison. What you're doing today, what does it cost? What would we propose you do in an optimized environment, and what would it look like? And what's the value of each of those decisions? It's really no different than what we do in our network services world. Quite frankly, we are operating very much the same way. We're vendor neutral and we're customer focused. So I jumped the gun a little bit, as I'm wont to do, because I enjoy talking so much. We do have a last question. We'd like to learn a little bit from you about which of our topics or which of the elements you found helpful today. And certainly we'd love to focus on those with you in any subsequent follow-up conversation. So I'd like to open it up for questions now. If you have any, if you've been saving them till the end, now is your time, because we're at the end. This is the point where I'm going to start making funny faces at you in the webcam if we don't get something going here. No, I do appreciate your time. I know that we covered a lot. Would love to revisit any of it with you again if there's some things that we went too quickly through, or you have some very specific questions. Very happy to work with you on that. Our marketing department is available to help set appointments for us. Of course, my contact information is on the bottom left-hand side of this. I welcome any questions or any comments that you have about our conversation today. And would like to thank you very much. Hope you have a great rest of the day. Post your questions in the Q&A section.